All right, we are go. Thank you very much for everyone joining me live, and welcome to anyone watching this replay later. Today, I want to discuss with you, I want to share with you 3 tips to increase metabolic rate and therefore lose weight more quickly, more efficiently than hopefully ever before. Why is this so important? I don't think I really need to sell people on this, but just to briefly explain. Using these 3 tips, if you can successfully increase the speed in layperson's terms of your metabolism, the speed at which your body uses calories for fuel and therefore will require more and more and more and more. You can raise your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, basically the amount of calories you burn at rest. Well, I don't think I need to pitch this too heavily. That's a fantastic advantage from a weight loss perspective. If simply by you sitting and being without doing exercise, without moving all that much, if you can simply increase the amount of calories you burn sitting still, what a massive advantage that is from a weight loss perspective. You can eat more food and lose more weight. So that's that out of the way. Let's get into our 3 tips. And thank you very much. Let's just give a quick shout out to everyone making comments. Darlene, Patrick, thanks folks for joining me live. Not many of you on yet, but I think the replays for these are always relatively popular. By the way, a bit of admin before we jump into tip number 1 here. I've got a big announcement. It's not even to do with my trip. I know everyone's eager to know where I'm going on this mysterious trip. This time next week, I'll actually be there. But I've got another huge announcement coming tomorrow, so follow me on Instagram. I'll announce it here in the coming days too, but follow me for Instagram for the latest on that. So tip number 1 then for increasing metabolic rate and therefore losing weight more quickly by increasing BMR. Number 1, don't. This one is interesting. Don't cut calories for too long, says the weight loss coach. Don't cut calories for too long. The problem is when you're in a calorie deficit, your metabolism does adjust. And it might not take as long as you think. Your metabolism will adjust and it will slow to make the new restricted amount that you're eating go further for fuel in the body. Your body will anticipate, okay, we know what's happening here. There's a trend. The last couple of days, Ryan has fed us slightly less food. We're going to be careful. We're going to slow down the metabolism so we can use those calories more effectively. This is a fantastic survival mechanism. This is a concept known as metabolic adaptation or adaptive thermogenesis. If you want to go and learn more on it, I have covered it briefly, I think, over the years on my channel here. So rather than, because you can actually undercut your weight loss efforts, people don't realize this. You get in that calorie deficit, but because your metabolism slows down as a response to being in the calorie deficits, you can almost negate the effects of being in a calorie deficit sometimes. But the good news is there are ways to protect yourself from this. And the one that I'm showing today is don't cut your calories heavily, certainly, or at all, frankly, for all that long. And I recommend every few months, if you are in a calorie deficit, if you're trying to lose weight right now, I recommend having a period of maintenance and increasing your calories, either doing something like reverse dieting, which I've spoken about a little bit on this channel, or having a maintenance reset. This is a pseudo term, but a reset of sorts. It's easy to use the word reset. People get what I mean by that. Coming up to near maintenance calories for a couple of weeks to then later come back down into the deficit and give your body that adjustment that it might need to fire up the metabolism again, increase metabolic rate, and then you can more effectively lose body fat in a deficit again, even in the same deficit that you were before. You can also, another top tip, so sometimes it's worth having breaks in your calorie deficit to mitigate against this. The other thing you can do to mitigate against a slowing metabolism is ensure that you don't have, and I talk about this extensively, ensure that you don't have a really aggressive and severe calorie deficit in the first place. You know, if you do this more conservatively, if you just start with that small deficit of 200 or 300 calories, like I often advise, certainly for women, that can be a great way to sort of feel things out without your body going, whoop, oh, hold on, what's going on here? I mean, it's going to still do that to a degree because the metabolism is clever. It will soon adjust. But you're gonna perhaps get away with a longer shot at staving off the really harmful effects of the metabolism slowing down with a much more sort of moderate approach to trimming calories off your diet, as opposed to just being gung-ho, and especially as a female, taking 500 calories off your daily diet, which I always argue for women especially is very, very, very much too much. So yeah, this is a great way to increase metabolic rate through periods of weight losses. Come out, have a reset, do a bit of reverse dieting, give yourself a break, ensure that you're not doing some crazy crash and burn diet where your deficit is really aggressive in the first place. And you can sort of protect the metabolism as best as you possibly can. But just know that long-term, being in a deficit, it will have these ramifications. If you're watching this video right now and you've been eating 1,000 calories for the last year, and you're wondering why on earth you're in a plateau despite doing everything perfectly, to the extent that you're only eating, well, it's not perfect, you're actually under eating, but you're eating 1,000 calories and you're checking the boxes, the fundamentals of this whole foods plant-based way of eating, and then you're scratching your head like, what's going on? Why am I not losing weight? You've probably gone too hard. You've probably gone far too hard, and your metabolism's like, you've been doing this for months. We know what you're doing. We're not going to lose body fat anymore. We're going to use those calories far more effectively now because we know what you're feeding us. And I've had this. I've had people come onto Vegan Slim and Sustain, and they have just been hitting 800 calories for months and months and months and months without knowing it, or maybe, intending to do so. Of course, we quickly correct this, and it's just startling to them that after a couple of weeks, we can get them losing weight, eating much more in terms of calories than they were before. It just goes to show that it really literally isn't calories in, calories out. It is more complex than that. And even though I put so much emphasis on calories on this channel, and I don't step back on that, rightly so, it's still worth saying that there is so much more to weight loss than calories. And metabolic rate is a great example of this. So is the adrenal system, so is inflammation in the body, so is your gut bacteria, so is hormone function and health, hormone health. And so, yeah, all of these things will contribute beyond calories. Tip number 2 for increasing metabolic rate and therefore losing weight more quickly: eating foods rich in capsaicin or similar. So things like chili and cayenne pepper, that spice, have been shown to increase metabolic rate fairly quickly after consumption in those with brown adipose tissue, brown fat, basically, in layperson's terms. And there's some really cool studies on this. I can't do this now because I've got tennis in about 25 minutes, so I've got to go shortly. But after I'm back from tennis, I will this evening put some links to some cool studies down below on this. There's really, really fascinating stuff where they give people cayenne pepper, and the response in terms of metabolic rate is absolutely fantastic. And the reason why this is because chili peppers, cayenne pepper, they're thermogenic. And there's lots of foods that are thermogenic, and I'll give you a couple more in a second, but they basically raise the body's temperature and allow you to burn more calories simply by eating that food. The other great advantage about foods with capsaicin is they tend to have an incredibly low caloric density anyway. So not only do you get this incredible extra calorie burn, potentially, I should say, you may get this extra calorie burn from eating chili and cayenne peppers. And not only do they increase metabolic rate themselves just purely by eating them, well, they also don't come with that many calories anyway. So in terms of the risk reward of, eating a certain food to create a certain response in the body, it's really fantastic because they're so, if chocolate increased metabolic rate, you'd think the juice isn't really worth the squeeze there because I have to eat 300 calories of chocolate to maybe squeeze, in the 2 hours after digestion, maybe squeeze 50 to 80 to 100 more calories out, right? That's not, as a net, that's a loss of maybe over 200 calories. It's not really worth it. But chili peppers and cayenne peppers happen to be so incredibly low in calories. And this is why they're often referred to as having this negative calorie effect, whereby you actually burn more from consuming them, even though you're consuming, which on paper, it doesn't particularly make sense, does it? It's a fantastic idea. So yeah, foods rich in capsaicin have been, excuse me, shown to do this and have a negative calorie effect in this regard. We don't know, and this is where it does get slightly confusing, but I said I'd mention this. We don't know if other foods with similar nutrition components, like, let me think, ginger, mustard seeds, what else has capsaicin or similar? Black pepper, I don't know if I mentioned. Did I just say ginger? I think I did. Garlic, we don't know if these foods have precisely the same effect, but I think, in my personal opinion, this is not immensely founded, but it's not unwise to guess that they might have the same effect in terms of metabolic rate. So take your current diet right now and try and add some of these things in, and it might make it's not a significant difference in terms of increasing metabolic rate and therefore burning more calories at rest, but it could certainly contribute to a degree to where I think it's worthwhile, even if it's not a significant amount. It's not going to mean that you burn 300 extra calories a day just from eating lots of chili. If only it was that straightforward. They'd make chili pills, and I'd be a multi-millionaire. I could just sell chili pills for boosting the metabolism. There are all sorts of products like that anyway, right? So sadly, it's not that effective. My assessment on these things is that they are worth a shot. They are absolutely significant enough to be worth a shot without them being groundbreaking. Otherwise, they'd be more talked about, I suppose. But yeah, the tricky thing with this is chili's uncomfortable for people, and there's a lot of people that don't like spice. So there's a lot of foods that don't like, the foods that have capsaicin in them in the first instance. And then, well, you're in trouble, right? What I'd recommend, no, not necessarily, because here's my suggestion, salsa. Salsa is a great way to do it because you can adjust the salsa as well with your own recipe. But you add some chili in there to maybe a tolerable degree for you, rather than thinking that you've got to add fresh chilies to all your dishes, or eat jalapenos, or et cetera, et cetera. Or add, loads of hot cayenne pepper seasoning on all your food, You don't necessarily need to take it to that degree. You could just make a kind of relatively what would be mild for you salsa, and it might have some small advantages in terms of increasing metabolic rate. Finally, number 3. I wonder if anyone can guess. I think the more experience with understanding of these subjects will. Building some muscle, which of course is not our forte here. But we acknowledge the importance of strength training. We acknowledge the importance of having some muscle as well. Yes, I'm a weight loss channel. Yes, that's what I specialize in. But I was a gym bro for years. And even though there's many things I'm embarrassed about those gym bro days, many of the habits I had back then that were not wise, many beliefs about nutrition certainly I had back then that were not wise. The stuff that I don't take back is training related. Having muscle mass is advantageous for your health in so many ways. I couldn't even write an essay on it, a 2,000-word essay that would cover it all. It's fantastic. But in terms of metabolic rate, some people will claim, and this is actually widely cited. So when I say some people, I know that's a vague comment, but this is so widely cited. Let's say lots of professionals will claim in the health world that 1 kilo of muscle mass can increase BMR based on metabolic rate, the amount of calories you use at rest, by up to 100 calories per day for 1 kilo of muscle, which just sounds fantastic, doesn't it? Okay, if I put on a bit of muscle, I can eat a bit of extra food, or I could even lose, more weight eating that extra food. I personally think that is probably overstated. I personally think that is probably very, very generous. And it doesn't align with this is very anecdotal, but what I've observed in people, that people with that much extra muscle mass can consume a great deal more calories and get away with it, quote unquote. I don't think it's to the tune of 100 calories for every kilo of muscle, or 50 calories for a pound of muscle. That's what's, again, often cited by professionals in this space. In the health world, I don't think it's to that degree, but I still think it still strikes me, and the studies are decent on this as well, but it still strikes me as fairly obvious and fairly non-controversial to say that having muscle mass means that you probably have a higher BMR than the version of you that doesn't have as much muscle mass. And this is because the way that excess body fat, the energy required to maintain and keep excess body fat versus muscle, there's many, many reasons why having muscle on your frame will actually burn more calories than body fat. There's many, many reasons. Just to give one very obvious one that people can sort of visualize and conceptualize so easily. Contracting the old tricep, the old shoulder here, the old bicep. This requires more calories. Me doing this right now, I'm burning maybe 1 calorie here. Squeeze tightly. Okay, maybe that's 2 calories burned. Okay, maybe that's 3 now. It's just become an excuse for me to show off my little armsies, hasn't it? No, but that contracting, squeezing, relaxing the muscle will burn more calories than if that was just fat on there, just wobbling around. It's true though. It's graphic, but it's true. So I think, even though this is not our forte, even though this is not what we do here, building some muscle could have a really positive impact on metabolic rate. And it's not just having muscle on your frame itself, it's also the pursuit of building muscle can also increase metabolic rate because it's another form of exercise. And it's a different form of exercise to something cardio related. So yeah, how do you build muscle on a vegan or plant-based diet? Well, you have to be very near calorie maintenance, if not in a slight surplus. You can build muscle in a calorie deficit, but it is arguably harder. You need to have a higher protein intake than what I typically tend to advise on this channel, but not by a long shot. It does still, in the gym bro world, get slightly overplayed, but you do need protein for muscle and tissue growth and repair, quite obviously. So you're thinking of tofu, which I mean, the foods I'm about to mention are foods I recommend I eat all the time. I have my clients eat all the time, but you might just want to push it a little bit further. But foods like tofu and tempeh and seitan, of course, our beans, lentils are fantastically high in fiber. Maybe you want a very clean pea protein powder, for example, like the Sun Warrior range to assist you. Seitan, wonderfully high in protein as well for very few calories. Seitan, a very lean source of protein in that it comes with very little fat to achieve that protein. So in terms of bang for buck for calories, seitan is just incredible. If you wanted to lean down, for example, and maintain as much muscle as possible, for the vegan gym bros that definitely don't watch my channel, but if you happen to be, seitan is just a cheat code because the amount of protein it offers for so few calories compared to like tofu and tempeh, which is still great, but compared to tofu and tempeh is astounding. And things like TVP as well. I'm not the biggest fan. I have it occasionally. I'm not the biggest fan of TVP just from a taste perspective, although you can do quite a lot with it. But that can be advantageous as well. So yeah, that's how you would, and strength training, obviously, with the principle of progressive overload, you're trying to get stronger. You're actually going into the gym being intentional about it. You're not just going in and lifting some weights and thinking, why aren't I making gains? No, you want to be intentional. You want to be working on doing more reps and more and lifting heavier weight versus your last session. And not every session is going to be like that. That is a ridiculous, unless you're a beginner, the rate of growth is not going to be like literally every session you can do 5 more reps on every exercise, or you can go to the heavier weights every session. It doesn't work like that. But to certainly build up to those things and put the muscles, under more tension, under more pressure, hypertrophy, principles of hypertrophy, doing more volume over time, will allow you to build some muscle regardless of your particular diet approach, so long as you are near calorie maintenance and eating lots of protein and getting lots of rest as well. I see a lot of people that are in the gym, or I speak to people in the gym and they're there every single day. It's not really, again, this is not my forte, so I'm leaving my comfort zone slightly in talking about this, obviously. But yeah, one mistake you will see with a lot of people trying to build muscle is that they actually train probably slightly too often. And actually, if they just had a little bit more rest and allowed the nutrients to get to the muscles to stimulate the growth and repair, they might find that they get even greater gains, both in terms of strength gains, but also in terms of muscle. That's it from me, folks. Tennis starts in 16 minutes. I got to get a hop on. 15 now. I got to get a hop on. Hopefully you found this useful. As always, veganslimandsustain.com if you want more help from this, more help from me rather, but hopefully this was useful regardless. 3 quick tips there to increase metabolic rate. Hope this helps you out. Speak soon.